Hello, I'm Betsan Corkhill and I'm based in the city of Bath in the UK. I'm a former physiotherapist now working as a lifestyle health and well-being coach. And I'm going to talk to you today about the science of knitting to change pain, to give you something extra for your well-being toolbox. I thought it would be useful and hopefully interesting to tell you a little bit about how all this started. I trained as a physiotherapist in the 1970s at the Middlesex Hospital, which was one of the leading London teaching hospitals at the time. It was a time when physiotherapists were very much trained as body mechanics, and I remember it as rather strict, starchy, and very much an us and them environment when it came to clinicians and patients. There was very definitely an air of the clinician, particularly the doctor, being right, knowing best, and dictating treatment plans. 2 years after qualifying, I started work at a large medical rehabilitation centre in Switzerland, where they really understood the value of looking at well-being and health and ill health from a whole person perspective, and that really opened my eyes to other approaches. So I stopped viewing the body like a mechanic would a car, and I've been using a whole person approach in my practice ever since. The clinic offered a lot of different, sometimes rather weird and wonderful treatments that I initially felt uncomfortable with. And doctors didn't just examine a painful knee, for example, they considered the whole person and prescribed a range of treatments aimed at the person as a whole and their general health and fitness. This included nutritional guidance, which was reinforced by staff in the centre's restaurants, and visits to hairdressers and beauticians. Coming from a Victorian London teaching hospital, it all felt a bit strange to me. It didn't sit well with that strictly biomechanical approach I'd been trained in. But I soon realised that people were improving and enjoying their treatments and getting better. And remember, this was back in the 70s, so it was way ahead of the time. So where did my interest in knitting begin? Fast forward to 2002, when I gave up physiotherapy because I became frustrated at the system I found myself working in. At the time, I was working in the community, visiting people of all ages who for some reason weren't able to come into the physiotherapy department. I hadn't realised until I began this work just how many people live within four walls, many of whom never see another human from 1 week to the next. And I'd be asked by their GP to help with their mobility, but it didn't take long to realise that Mrs. Smith wasn't getting out of her chair because she had no reason to, no purpose or meaning to her day or life. And I felt we needed to take a step back with these people. They needed social contact, social interaction, to find a purpose to each day, to develop an interest in the world, as well as ongoing longer-term support to improve their well-being before they could be expected to make the lifestyle changes needed. It could never be achieved in the 4 or 5 times that I was allowed to visit. So I had a complete change of career and became a freelance production editor working on a range of computer and camera magazines. Eventually I ended up working for a range of craft magazines where I was put in charge of the letters pages, and this entailed reading all the letters coming in. They received sacks full of letters every day, and most of these letters spoke about the therapeutic benefits of crafts, but particularly knitting. The first letter I read was from a 14-year-old girl who had frequent hospital stays, and she said, "I don't have to take my pain medication when I knit." The second was from a lady who had tried to take her own life. Her husband, in desperation, had taken a knitting kit into the hospital. She wrote, "I look forward to every project, and now I look forward to tomorrow." I look forward to tomorrow. I thought, wow, this is powerful, profound, life-changing stuff. And the most compelling thing was the large numbers of people from around the world, from different cultures, different backgrounds, saying very similar things. It was then a little light went on in my head. I thought, could this be used to motivate the people I used to see on my community rounds to provide purposeful activity from the armchair, to spark an interest in the world again? Could something like this be used as a springboard to other activities? Because it's certainly what the letters were suggesting. So the magazines made it known that I was interested in researching this further, and knitters from around the world started sending me their stories, and as I delved deeper, I realised that there was potentially something very exciting here. There was a lot more to it, and something which could possibly change the way we treat long-term conditions. I wanted to know what was happening and how. I wanted to know the science behind all these stories. I've been researching the meditative, creative and social benefits of knitting since 2005, and what I've found is exciting. Slowly over the years, my research into knitting has merged with my work in improving well-being and led me down paths I probably wouldn't have otherwise taken, so it's made my life much richer. I set up Stitch Links in 2005 because I recognised that people would need a safe, trustworthy source of information about using knitting therapeutically, and our newsletter now goes out to 92 countries. It was at this time that I set up a therapeutic knitting group in a pain clinic in Bath and started to get really interested in pain. But it's been a hard road. As you can imagine, it hasn't been easy to get clinicians, scientists and researchers to consider that knitting could be used as a therapeutic tool. Everyone has their preconceptions about the word knitting, and the K word has been the biggest barrier to this work. But I got to know Lorimer Moseley, and when we chatted through my thoughts, he encouraged me to persevere. He also suggested that initially it might be a good idea to call knitting something different, because I found that the moment I mentioned the K word, people at best lost interest, or at worst laughed out loud and thought I was some evangelical knitter who'd gone a bit crazy, when ironically, at the time, I was just learning to knit to do this work. So in order to get my foot in the door with clinicians, neuroscientists and academics, I had to call knitting something different. So I called it a bilateral rhythmic psychosocial intervention to change their perspective, to spark their interest, to pique their interest before the K word was mentioned. Before I go further about the benefits of knitting, I want to tie this into what we now know about pain. I like to think of pain as emerging from a complex conversation that goes on between your expectations, everything going on within you and around you, your immediate environment, wider world, world events. Everything you do, everyone you meet, even the things you listen to on the radio, watch on the TV or read about, influences this conversation. Even all those things you know, but that you don't know that you know. Pain emerges or is perceived when that complex conversation concludes as a credible threat to you. Pain is not made by your brain or by your body. It's made by the whole person that is you, within your environment, within your life, culture, and the wider world. And we now know there's no linear relationship between the state of a body structure and pain, and that you can experience pain without any prior injury. So the body mechanic approach, which assumes the pain must be coming from somewhere or something and aims at fixing that part, doesn't work. It's a lot more complex. But this complexity gives hope. Because everything goes into this conversation, it gives us many avenues in to change this conversation. And we're often told there's nothing that can be done for long-term pain, but change is possible. And that's such a hopeful, powerful message. And therapeutic knitting can be used as an effective tool to facilitate this positive change. This is what one knitter told me. Knitting requires me to think creatively, to plan, prepare, organise, coordinate and control just one small aspect of my life. Then any other changes are manageable. Our bodily systems aren't simply able to change, they were designed to change in response to experience and our environment. It's called plasticity, and we can learn to use this fact to our advantage. The beauty of complex systems is that small changes can result in big overall changes. For example, the way you think can change your immune system. When I first heard this, I thought, wow, the way I think, my state of mind could influence whether I catch a cold or not. Our other systems are changing all the time too. Our nervous system, stress and immune systems change in response to experience and our environment. Our muscles and heart change in response to the amount of exercise we do. Even your skin. If you walk for long enough without shoes on, the skin on the soles of your feet will thicken up. So our biological systems are changing all the time. Our bodies work as a whole, within an environment and culture, and change in response. So that change isn't just possible, it's happening all the time. And therapeutic knitting is about using knitting to facilitate positive change. It's about using knitting to change that complex conversation. I was introduced to a whole person approach to health when I worked in Switzerland in the 70s, and thankfully the importance of this wider approach is being increasingly recognised. We need to consider our health and well-being from this wider perspective of the whole complex human within their environment, culture and world. We need to look beyond medical treatment for long-term success and consider the pain you experience and your health within that wider context of your whole life in your environment and world. Dr. Margaret Hanna puts it very nicely in her book Humanising Healthcare, Patterns of Hope for a System Under Strain. In it she says, health is not just the absence of disease. Becoming well is about restoring connection with life through a healthy relationship with ourselves, other people and the wider world. I've been collecting stories from knitters around the world since 2005, and I became intrigued by why some people live happy, fulfilled lives despite numerous problems, while others sink under seemingly minor issues. And these core issues come up time and time again, and they apply to us all. The other things going on in your life make a big difference to how you manage life's inevitable challenges, as well as how you manage or recover from illness. And these issues are part of that complex conversation that determines the pain you experience. And I'm making a distinction here between rewarding purposeful occupation and dutiful purposeful occupation. For me, housework is a dutiful purposeful occupation. And those who are busy, stressed or ill often prioritise dutiful activities over those beneficial for their well-being. And that needs to be turned around. And these issues feed on each other to give symptoms such as stress, worry, sleep problems, irritable bowel syndrome, migraine, muscle tension and pain. And it's my experience that if these underlying core issues aren't dealt with, it becomes very difficult to deal with the symptoms. You need to deal with these issues for longer term success when living with pain or any other health issue. And therapeutic knitting alone and in a group can help you deal with these. So how can therapeutic knitting influence this conversation? I'm often asked if there's a difference between knitting and therapeutic knitting, and the idea of therapeutic knitting has evolved over the years. Therapeutic knitting equals a combination of knitting and knowledge to deliberately improve well-being. It's about having knowledge about whole person health and about how you can enhance the benefits of knitting to improve well-being. So it can work if you are fit and healthy to manage stress on a day-to-day basis, as well as life's inevitable challenges, or it can be taken a step further to manage a range of medical conditions. So let's take a look behind the K word. Knitting equals patterns of hand movement and hand position. An enriched environment. And you can choose to knit in a group with all the extra benefits that brings. In addition to the benefits listed, knitting in a group encourages the sharing of stories. It enables the building of safe, supportive networks and can help you to integrate into and belong to a community. Benefits of knitting alone are different from knitting in a group, and you'll find the benefits outlined in column 2 and 3 in other creative activities. All these issues can contribute to changing that complex conversation to change pain. All are beneficial for your well-being. The portability of knitting is really important in its use as a therapeutic tool. It gives you a powerful tool at your fingertips anytime, anywhere, even in the middle of the night when things can often seem quite dark, or in crowded public transport. It enables people to be more social because knitting acts as a self-soothing tool to manage any worries, emotions you may have in social situations. It also enables us to use it in a busy clinical environment. Along with this portability is this first column that sets knitting apart from other activities. The function of our hands and the information we get through them is important. Our hands have driven the development of our brains throughout evolution. Lucy was a pre-human who lived about 3.2 million years ago in eastern Africa. She was found to have an un-ape-like hand but an ape-like brain, so her hands were evolving before her brain. Bilateral coordinated patterns of movement that cross the midline of the body take up a lot of brain capacity. They make your brain work hard. Your brain has a fixed capacity for conscious attention in any given moment. When you're totally absorbed in an activity like this, your brain has less capacity left to pay attention to other issues which might be detrimental to your well-being. The rhythm of the movements facilitates a meditative-like state, a sense of deep relaxation, and is instantaneously familiar, calming and relaxing, and most stories tell of the rhythm of the movements. Knitting helps me to slow down my thoughts so I can process them. It helps me shed the stress of the day. It gives me a rhythm to breathe and think and feel. The brain likes rhythmic movement because it's predictable. It makes the brain feel safe, and we engage in rhythmic repetitive movement instinctively when we're stressed. Many ancient cultures have tools that involve repetitive hand movements to ease stress and distress. You have the rosary, worry beads, worry stones. The Chinese have chime balls. Nurturing feelings of safety is hugely important for changing that conversation, improving pain and your general well-being. In our Stitch Links Cardiff University study of over 3,500 knitters from 32 countries, one of our most significant findings was that the more frequently people knit, the happier and calmer they reported feeling. You needed to knit more than 3 times a week. And if you combine this sensation of instantaneous calm with knitting's portability, you have a powerful tool you can use anytime, anywhere. This feeling of calm can help you manage stress on a day-to-day basis. Stress and pain are very closely entwined. You may have noticed that if stress levels are high, you feel more pain. Stress is a major piece of this conversation. It also contributes significantly to other issues such as sleep problems. You can also use knitting to significantly improve your sleep. Sleeping well is about a lot more than the time when you're in bed. Sleep is strongly influenced by the way you live your life, your habits and your routines. You can use therapeutic knitting to help you focus on relaxation and winding down throughout the day. Use it just before bed or in the middle of the night if you wake. If you find your thoughts are whirring around, try knitting for 10 to 20 minutes before you go to sleep. Those thoughts will stop worrying and your mind will calm. You can even do it in bed. Choose an easy project you don't have to think about and keep that project by your bedside so it's handy if you wake in the night. If you're sleeping with a partner, then use wooden needles as they may not find the click of the metal ones as relaxing as you do. Going back to the movements, if you give the brain a background automatic task, it seems to facilitate more free-flowing conversation and laughter. In a therapeutic setting, this can be really helpful if you find it difficult to talk. I've often sat knitting side by side with someone who, after a time, will say, "I haven't told anyone this before." And that's often the start of a valuable conversation about an issue that is hugely relevant to their pain. My thoughts are that the automatic nature of the movement may facilitate access to the subconscious. Automatic movements happen in the subconscious. It appears to break patterns of rumination. Knitters report that knitting seems to break those negative thought cycles. They tell me it gives them a break from the constant chitter-chatter of thoughts, all of which can change our conversation and change pain. This quote is from a young person with paranoid schizophrenia. Knitting is the only thing that quietens the voices in her head. Other people describe it as stopping the hammering of thoughts in their head. When I knit, I reach a place of peace that I cannot reach in silence. The silence is more often so loud with negative thoughts and memories. The hand position protects your personal space, and this helps people to feel safer attending a group, on public transport, or when socializing, enabling them to go out more. The combination of rhythmic bodily movement and a meditative state is important. There's more evidence emerging that you can't control your mind with your mind, using what we call a top-down approach. But it's much more likely if you involve the bodily movement. So you're also changing the input into the brain, bottom up. Knitting has the bottom-up input of the rhythmic movement and the top-down effect of calm. An enriched environment is important for well-being and brain health, and I'm just going to pick out some of these. Creativity is important for well-being, psychological flexibility, self-management, problem-solving. If you're thinking creatively, you have more options open to you. When you live with pain, the scope of your world can narrow, close down. So learning to think creatively again opens up your world. It widens your experience space from which your brain draws information to influence that conversation. The Neuro-Orthopedic Institute wrote an article in support of therapeutic knitting. They called it Pitching for Stitching. In it was a paragraph about creativity. It said creativity has a biological basis and, as perhaps the ultimate whole person output, can powerfully unleash beneficial bioplastic change. Creativity, mental agility and exploration encourage a healthy brain environment, and under these conditions, rehabilitation, therapy and medication would be more effective and more likely to work. And this makes sense, doesn't it? The more you can work on improving your own health, including brain health, the more effective any treatment you're receiving can be. And there's no doubt in my mind that it's better to be actively creative rather than being a passive recipient in life. But before you can start to think outside the box, you need a box or a framework. And I found this is a particularly important aspect of knitting when developing it as a healthcare tool. Many people are afraid to try new things, afraid of failure, so need a safe framework within which we can nurture creative ability. And knitting has this framework of a pattern within which we can nurture creative ability to a point where people are happy to explore and experiment, to try out new ideas, to risk making a few mistakes. Looking further at that second column of the knitting equation, regular novelty is good for us. It facilitates the growth of new brain cells, opens up new neural pathways, nurtures a healthy brain, opens up and enriches our world, and keeps us interested in the world and more interesting to others. It can act as a springboard to other things which opens up your world further. Regular novelty is easy to introduce through knitting. The importance of being successful at something has really shone through in this work. None of the people I visited on my rounds as a community physiotherapist had anything in their lives they felt successful at. Your brain has a system called the reward system, which fires off a boost of feel-good, motivating, pain-relieving chemicals when you're successful at a task that requires little effort. Part of the therapeutic approach is learning to set your projects at the right level, a level that requires a little effort but at which you know you'll be successful at, certainly at the start. Doing things and being successful at them keeps this important brain circuit healthy and also motivates you to want to try other things. It can act like a springboard to other activities and back into life. Knitting's portability enables you to be successful from an armchair or bed, and this is hugely important when living with pain. And you get 3 rewards when you knit: the ongoing reward of the process, the end product, and you can choose to give this as a gift to a friend, family or charity. As well as the chemical aspect of reward, success enables you to rediscover lost emotions, nurture healthy curiosity. It encourages forward thinking, anticipation. It's constructive when everything else may seem negative or destructive. I remember one man telling me, "This is the most constructive thing I've done for years." It changes your perspective of yourself and the world. It changes your personal story. It helps you build a more positive identity. Knitting for charity and others is an important means of contributing to society. Our group clothed the children of an entire village in Lesotho. and we were sent a video of the children receiving their gifts, which is a tremendous boost to those in the group. It's motivating. I can do it nurtures a desire to do more, all of which have a powerful influence on that complex conversation. This lady decorates her walking sticks with knitted walking stick cozies and found that people stopped seeing her disability and started commenting on her skills. This is a lovely quote from another knitter. I feel able, not disabled, valid, not invalid. John Cacioppo's work into loneliness has found that we need to address the social and emotional aspects of loneliness. People need emotional nurturing. The feeling of loneliness causes stress levels to rise, the levels of perceived threat to rise. It increases inflammation, it decreases the effectiveness of sleep, which can all make pain feel worse. So it makes a lot of sense to deal with this as part of a whole person approach to your well-being and pain. Knitting groups provide a means of safe, rich social contact with people from different cultural backgrounds, a range of educational backgrounds, knitters from all walks of life and ages. Like pain, it cuts across class, culture, beliefs, backgrounds. It provides a level playing field no matter what your background. And this is really important for building compassion and understanding in communities. It also helps you meet new people and build a strong, supportive network. We know that laughter and easy banter with friends is the opposite to your stress, fight or flight response. So the more you can engage in this sort of social contact, the easier it will become to tune up the body's natural healing systems. And knitting enables social engagement. The activity makes it easier to attend a group. The common interest gives you a point of conversation that's outside yourself. Hand position protects your personal space, making you feel safer. Knitting provides you with a self-soothing tool to manage any emotions or anxiety at attending a group. And you can choose whether to have eye contact or not. And we found the or not is really important, because it's perfectly acceptable to sit and knit quietly. It puts the knitter in complete control over how much they wish to participate. And this is really important because it's not easy to join a group for the first time. Having the opportunity to just be in the safe company of others without feeling a pressure to participate is hugely important and is an experience that many don't have the opportunity to enjoy. Both knitting alone and in a group will help you manage loneliness. Loneliness and being alone are very different. Knitting alone can also help you deal with loneliness. Knitting enables you to learn to just be in your own company. Learning to enjoy solitude is important, and whereas loneliness raises threat level to bias that conversation towards making more pain, enjoyment of solitude nurtures feelings of safety and is beneficial to your well-being. Knitting on my own brings me peace and calm. Knitting with others makes me laugh and enjoy myself. Knitting can help raise your mood. In our Stitchling's Cardiff University study of over 3,500 people from 32 countries, one of the most significant findings was that 81% of respondents reported feeling happier after knitting, with 54% feeling happy or very happy. Fewer than 1% remained sad, and excitingly this translated across to those with clinical depression. Your mood plays a big part in that conversation. We also found that texture is twice as significant as colour for affecting mood. If you touch something good, you feel good. So we're back to the hands and the importance of the information we get from them. So there are lots of simple ways you can improve your mood. I know some of you have pets, so stroking your pet is rhythmic, it feels good, so it can also help your pain. It's about doing lots of little things that can change that conversation. Stroking my stash makes me feel good. This quote always makes me smile, and I can remember when I first used it in a talk to a room full of doctors, there was complete and utter silence. So you can use your knitting to deliberately raise mood. If you're feeling a bit low, use your favourite brighter colours. Remember, touching something good makes you feel good, so think about the texture of your yarn. Use variety to learn new skills. Remember, regular novelty is good for you. Use this knowledge to enhance the benefit of your knitting, to improve well-being. Having a portable, effective tool at your fingertips anytime, anywhere enables you to feel more in control, and feeling in control can significantly affect your outlook on life. Looking more broadly, as someone who lives with pain, you may find periods in your life when you spend a lot of time waiting around, in doctor's surgeries for example. A portable project can help you manage any anxieties around those times and also that roller coaster of emotions, and enable you to be productive in that waiting time. There's a growing need for instant gratification in our modern world, but lasting success in all aspects of life requires ongoing commitment, perseverance, and patience, and we're in danger of losing those skills to the detriment of our well-being. And that's become a really big problem in healthcare. We've come to expect a quick fix, to expect a doctor to fix us with a pill. And knitting teaches you that you have to work towards and wait for the best outcomes. In our survey, knitters told us they learned patience, perseverance, planning, commitment, that things are never perfect, that the best way of learning is through trial and error. Interestingly, they also told us that they learned that mistakes can be undone, that you can reach your end goal despite a few detours along the way, and often that end goal is richer as a result of the lessons learned. And these are really valuable life skills, and they're vital for long-term success in all areas of life, particularly health. And when living with pain, because there isn't a quick fix, you need patience, perseverance, and courage. But persevere, and things will happen, things will change. So let's take it a step further now to look at how knitting can fit into a busy clinical environment. The practicalities are that it's portable, the learning process involves no wasted materials, it's deliverable in kit form to armchair or bed, it's not messy to set up or clear up, it requires no artistic talent so that reward is attainable by everyone. It cuts across class, culture, educational background, and it can be learned from or reinforced from DVDs, books or YouTube. Stories from knitters mention over 60 medical conditions, and many of these conditions have symptoms in common, and these are some that knitting can help with. If you live with pain, you may well have a range of other issues because living with pain is complex and challenging. Knitting can also help you deal with the challenges of reducing medication. It's a powerful distractant, it's calming, mood enhancing, it occupies your hands and your mind, and enables you to make friends and establish a supportive network, all of which can help when reducing medication. I want to tackle some of the myths now. Yes, men can do it too. Actually, the first knitters were men. Knitting was also the treatment of choice for shell shock following World War I, and this image shows soldiers being treated with knitting for shell shock or post-traumatic stress disorder following World War I at the Walter Reed Memorial Hospital in about 1918. I've used knitting in a clinical setting with men, and I found that if I explained the benefits knitting could have for them, most of them are happy to learn. They're understandably reluctant to join a group that's predominantly female, so tend to prefer to knit alone, but would be happy to knit in a men's group. And we hear a lot about knitting and mindfulness, but it's not just about mindfulness. As you'll have seen from the knitting equation, it's a lot more complex. There are also a number of other mind states you can enter when you knit, and these have their benefits too. And these are dependent on the project you're knitting. So have a few projects on the go that will enable you to go into a range of beneficial states of mind. You can choose to knit mindfully. A complex project or something new will facilitate a state of focused attention. An easy project will enable you to go into a state of effortless presence, or even a state of daydreaming, which can also be beneficial. Knitters say it's like giving their mind a mini break from the stresses of the world. And people with hand pain can also knit, providing they choose the right materials and pace their knitting activity. It's very sad to see people stopping knitting because they think the movement will damage arthritic or painful hands further, when actually the movements, if practiced with the correct materials and pacing, will improve their hands. Wooden needles are generally easier. Polished birch has less friction than bamboo. Don't make the mistake of thinking big needles are better. Big needles means a heavier project. Very fine needles will also make your hands ache more. Circular needles will allow the weight of your work to rest in your lap. Pace your knitting. If your hands are very painful, you may only be able to knit 5 stitches. Stop and do another 5 in an hour's time, and gradually build up the amount of work your hands are able to do. It will improve your hand function in other areas of life too. Movement lubricates and strengthens joints and muscles, so pain will improve too when the activity is paced and gradually nudged up. If you have hand, arm or neck pain, try sitting a pillow on your lap and rest your hands and project on the pillow to support the weight. In this position, you only need very small movements of the fingers to make a stitch. If looking down is painful, clip your pattern onto a copy holder. Bearing in mind that sitting for long periods isn't good for you, get up and walk around every 20 to 30 minutes, stretch gently and focus on a distant object. This is an important aspect of therapeutic knitting. It's not about sitting and knitting all day. It's about using it as a tool to improve your well-being. This kind of gradual approach should be familiar to most of you. In therapeutic knitting, the process is more important than the end product. And you don't have to be an expert for it to be therapeutic. The movements become rhythmic very quickly. Allow your mind to slow and flow into the rhythm of your hands. It's more about the process than the end product. I'm very proud that Lorimer Moseley wrote the foreword to my book, Knit for Health and Wellness. He encouraged me and supported me right from the beginning. In the foreword he says, it's about embracing the complexity of how and why our brain produces experiences. It's about making things, giving things, sharing things, while you make your own journey to recovery. I suspect you will have a rewarding trip. I think this is a lovely quote to finish with. Things happen to force you into the role of victim, totally at the whim and mercy of healthcare providers, insurance personnel, and your own body. To have a measure of control given back to you through the act of creative expression means there is the birth of hope in your life every time you pick your project up. And where there is hope, there is healing. Think of it as making lots of small changes to that complex conversation that's going on in all of us all of the time. Remember that the beauty of complex systems is that often small changes have a big overall effect.